The sun rose golden over New Haven Colony, painting the wheat fields in warm light. Children ran through the streets laughing and shouting as the annual harvest festival began. Colorful banners hung between buildings and the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat filled the air. It was the most peaceful day of the year on this quiet farming world at the edge of human space. Elena Marsh stood on the steps of the colony administration building and watched the celebration with a tired smile. She was 42 years old and had served in Earthfleet for 20 years before taking this quiet posting. New Haven was not a place where anything exciting happened. The colony had 12,000 people, 2 small defense ships, and absolutely no strategic importance. That was exactly why Lane had chosen it. Park walked through the festival crowd holding his daughter Sophie's hand. She was 8 years old with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Her younger brother Tommy ran ahead of them toward a candy stall, was 38 and had moved to New Haven 5 years ago after his wife passed away. He wanted his children to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere far from the dangers of the cool worlds. He tugged at his hand and pointed at a putt show, laughed and gave her permission to go watch with her friends. He stood back and watched her run off, his heart full of simple happiness. He had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, his entire world would shatter. Above the planet, space itself seemed to tear open. 15 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were dark and angular, covered in sharp edges and weapons. The Dominion had come to New Haven. 2 human defense ships detected the threat immediately. Captain aboard the Guardian sent an urgent message to Commander Marsh and then turned his small vessel toward the enemy fleet. He knew he had no chance. He knew he would die, but he needed to buy time for the people below. Battle lasted less than 3 minutes. Both human ships were torn apart by overwhelming firepower. Captain and his crew of 40 never even scratched the enemy shields. Commander Marsh received the alert and her blood went cold. She grabbed her communicator and broadcast an emergency signal across the entire colony. The festival music stopped. The laughter died. People looked up at the sky and saw dark shapes descending through the clouds. Landing ships came down fast and hard. They hit down near the schools and the centers. This was not random. It was planned. Heard the explosions and the screaming. He ran toward the putt show where he had left Sophie. People rushed past him in blind panic. Soldiers in black armor marched through the streets, their weapons humming with deadly energy. They were not shooting at the adults. They were hurting them away. They were taking the children. Sophie being pulled toward a transport ship along with dozens of other kids. He screamed her name and pushed through the crowd. A soldier struck him across the face with the butt of a rifle, and he fell hard onto the ground. Blood poured from a cut above his eye. He saw her father fall. She screamed for him and tried to run back. A soldier grabbed her and carried her into the transport. The doors closed behind her. To his feet, but the ship was already lifting off. He watched it rise into the sky, carrying his daughter and hundreds of other children toward the waiting fleet above. He fell to his knees and wept. Commander Marsh organized what defense she could, but it was hopeless. They were not interested in fighting. They had come for one thing only. Within 30 minutes, they had loaded 412 children onto their transport ships. Then they broadcast a message on all frequencies. Commander appeared on every screen in the colony. His face was gray and reptilian, with cold yellow eyes and rows of sharp teeth. His name was, and he spoke with obvious pleasure. Children would be taken to prime. They would be sold in the slave markets unless humanity surrendered 3 border systems to the Dominion within 10 standard days. If humans attempted a rescue, the children would be killed. If humans attacked in territory, the children would be killed. The message ended with laughing. Marsh stood in the ruins of her peaceful colony and felt something cold settle into her chest. She had one communication satellite still functioning. She used it to send a priority message to Earth Fleet headquarters on Luna. The message reached Admiral Grace 6 hours later. She was 56 years old and had commanded fleets in 3 different conflicts. She had seen terrible things in her long career, but when she read the report from New Haven, her hands began to shake. Her had been visiting New Haven. Her daughter had sent them there for the festival, thinking it would be safe, thinking it would be fun. She sat alone in her office for a long time. Then she stood up and walked to her communication console. She entered a code that only 12 people in all of human space knew existed. Recall Omega. Across the human worlds, officers in secret installation received the alert. Reserve fleets that officially did not exist began powering up their engines. Veterans who had retired decades ago found messages waiting on their personal diodes. The message was simple: the children need you. In 6 hours, every single one of them had responded. Every single one of them was coming. New Haven, Park sat in the medical center while a nurse cleaned the wound on his face. He had not spoken since watching his daughter taken away. Commander Marsh came to see him and told him that help was coming. He looked at her with empty eyes. Would not bring Sophie back. Nothing would bring her back. They were too strong. Everyone knew that. Commander Marsh had seen something in Admiral's response, something that made her think they had made a terrible mistake. In her office on Luna, Admiral looked out at the stars. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something ancient and terrible. She thought about Sophie Park and the 411 other children on the slave ships. She thought about her own somewhere among them. I have no idea what they have just done, she said quietly to the empty room. They have no idea what is coming for them. Stars seemed to grow brighter, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Emergency council chamber on Luna was filled with the most powerful people in human space. President Daniel sat at the head of the long table, his face grim and tired. He was 61 years old and had led the United Human Worlds through 15 years of careful peace. Now that peace was burning. Gray stood before a massive display screen showing the star map between human space and territory. Red dot marked the path the slave ships had taken. Blue dots showed the position of every human military vessel. There were far more blue dots than anyone in the galaxy would have. Minion believes we are weak, said. Her voice was steady but cold. They believe we are traitors and diplomats. They believe we have no stomach for war. Stint leaned forward. And why do they believe that, Admiral? We have spent 200 years making them believe it, sir. Because we wanted peace. Because we knew what we were capable of and we were afraid of ourselves. The room was silent. Everyone present knew the history. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself 3 times before reaching the stars. The wars of the 21st and 22nd centuries had killed billions. When humans finally achieved peace among themselves, they had made a collective decision. They would never again unleash their full capacity for violence unless there was no other choice. They had hidden their weapons. They had downplayed their technology. They had presented themselves to the galaxy as reasonable, peaceful people who preferred negotiation to conflict. It had worked. For 200 years, humanity had lived in peace with the other species of the Galactic Council. They had built trade networks and diplomatic relationships. They had made themselves useful and unthreatening. They had never forgotten. They had never stopped preparing for the day when someone would test them. Is it time? The President asked quietly. They took our children, sir. Yes, it is time. The Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Santos requested an emergency session. She was 45 years old, career diplomat known for her calm demeanor and reasonable position. When she entered the great chamber and took her place at the human delegation podium, no one expected what would happen next. Counselor presided over the session. He was ancient even by the long-lived standards of the species, with silver scales and wise old eyes. He had known humans for over a century and considered them friends. Ambassador Santos, he said kindly, we have heard about the incident at New Haven. The Council offers its condolences. However, the border territories are under dispute, and Council rules prevent us from interfering in such matters. Santos stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then she spoke and her voice was different, harder, older somehow. Galactic Council has rules, she said. Humanity respects those rules. We have always respected those rules. But there are older laws, laws that existed before the Council was formed. Laws written in blood and fire by species that no longer exist. If it uncomfortably, Ambassador, I do not understand. I'm invoking the right of retribution, Santos said. Under Article 7 of the Founding Compact, any species may declare unlimited war against another if their young are taken for slavery. This right cannot be. This right cannot be limited. This right cannot be negotiated. Chamber erupted in confused murmuring. The right of retribution had not been invoked in 3,000 years. Most species had forgotten it existed. It's a hand for silence. Ambassador Santos, surely there is another way. They are powerful. A war would cause tremendous suffering on both sides. Perhaps we could negotiate for the return of the children. Santos smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. High Counselor, with respect, you do not understand what is about to happen. Humanity is not going to negotiate. Humanity is not going to make demands. Humanity is going to get our children back, and anyone who stands in our way will be removed. The man in the chamber laughed out loud. The Dominion has 2,000 warships, he sneered. You humans have what, 100, 200? You are farmers and merchants. You do not frighten us. Santos turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. You should be frightened, she said softly. You should be terrified. Your people made a terrible mistake, and now you are going to learn why the rest of the galaxy should be grateful that humans chose peace. Turn back to faith the full council. We are not asking for permission. We are not asking for help. We are informing you as required by law that a state of unlimited war now exists between humanity and the Dominion. Stay out of our way. He walked out of the chamber without another word. As human space, the awakening continued. Ships that had been disguised as cargo freighters revealed hidden weapons and armor. Bases that appeared to be mining operations launched fighters by the hundreds. Veterans who had been farmers and teachers and doctors put on old uniforms that still fit perfectly. Haven, Dr. Park heard that a rescue fleet was forming. He went to Commander Marsh and demanded to join. She told him he had no military training. He told her that his daughter was on one of those ships and nothing in the universe would stop him from going after her. Marsh looked at him for a long time. Then she gave him a place on a medical support vessel. Admiral assembled her fleet at the rally point near the border. 200 ships, then 300, then 500. They kept coming. Ships from every human world crewed by people who had answered the call without hesitation. I contacted privately and asked her a question. What will humanity do if the children are harmed? Answered without emotion. Then there will be no more Dominion. There will be no more Prime. There will be no memory that they ever existed. We will erase them so completely that 1,000 years from now, no one will remember their name. Matt ended the communication and sat alone in the dark for a long time, wondering what humanity really was beneath their peaceful mask. Fleet departed for space. 800 ships in perfect formation, moving faster than any species thought humans could travel. Children were out there somewhere in the dark between stars. Their parents were coming for them. Slave transport moved through the cold darkness between stars. Inside its metal belly, 412 human children huddled together in a massive holding cell. The walls were bare steel. The floor was cold. The air smelled wrong. Park sat with her back against the wall, her arms wrapped around two younger children who were crying. She was only 8 years old, but she had decided that someone needed to be brave. Someone needed to help the little one stay calm. Father had taught her something important once. He had said that being scared was normal. Everyone got scared sometimes. But courage was not about not being scared. Courage was about doing the right thing even when you were scared. She was very scared, but she kept her voice steady when she spoke to the younger children. She told them stories. She made up games. She organized the older kids to help watch over the younger ones. Guards watched through the sub-bars with confusion. They had tamed children from many species over the years. Usually by now, the young ones would be broken. They would be screaming and crying and baying. They would be easy to control. These human children were different. They were quiet. They stayed together. They comforted each other. It was strange and somehow unsettling. And received reports about the children's behavior and dismissed it as unimportant. He was more concerned about the message he had just received from Dominion intelligence. A human fleet had been detected moving toward space. Not worried. He had 40 warships waiting at the border, and the full might of the Dominion battle fleet was gathering at Prime. 2,000 ships. The humans were brave to attempt a rescue, but bravery would not save them. The fleet reached the border in 3 days. This fact alone should have alarmed them. The journey should have taken 3 weeks at normal speeds. Human ships were not supposed to be this fast. 40 border ships formed a defensive line and waited. Their commander, a veteran named, had fought in a dozen campaigns. He had never lost a battle. He watched the human fleet approach and felt confident. Confident ladded until the first shots were fired. The ships did not fight like any he had ever seen. They moved with impossible precision, flowing around formations like water around stone. Their weapons tore through shields that should have held for hours. Their pilots executed maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, all 40 ships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had suffered minor damage to only 3 vessels. 5. The destruction of his ship. He floated in the wreckage, watching the human fleet continue past without slowing down. They did not stop to take prisoners. They did not stop to celebrate. They simply moved forward toward Prime. Understood then that something had gone terribly wrong. These were not the peaceful humans he had been told about. These were something else entirely. Commanded the assault carrier relentless from the center of the human formation. He was 35 years old and had spent his entire adult life training for a battle he hoped would never come. Now it had come, and he found that he felt nothing but cold focus. Admiral contacted him after the border battle. Good work, Captain. How is the crew? But the Admiral, eager, angry. Keep them focused. We are not here for revenge. We are here for the children. Everything else is secondary. Understood? It was easy to let anger take control. It was easy to want to make them suffer for what they had done. But that was not the mission. The mission was simple: get the children back safely. Everything else could wait. It led the rescue team that would board the slave transport and extract the children. She was 29 years old, small and quick, with sharp eyes and steady hands. Her team of 50 soldiers trained constantly during the journey, memorizing the layout of slave ships, practicing room clearing and hostage rescue until they could do it in their sleep. Park worked with the medical team that would receive the children once they were rescued. He checked supplies. He prepared treatment protocols. He tried not to think about Sophie alone and scared in the dark. He thought about her anyway, every minute of every day. To receive word of the border fleet's destruction and felt the first cold touch of fear. He contacted Dominion High Command and requested reinforcements. The response came quickly. The entire battle fleet was already moving to intercept the humans. 2,000 ships would crush this human force and teach them a lesson they would never forget. Relief washed over him. 2,000 ships. Ian Hume could not stand against such overwhelming number. His senses detected something that made his blood run cold. The human fleet had grown. Somewhere during the journey, more ships had joined them. 800 vessels now moved toward Prime in perfect formation. Behind them, more were coming, many more. Got the sensor readings and realized that humans had been lying to the galaxy for 200 years. They had hidden their true strength. They had pretended to be weak. And now, because his people had taken their children, they were revealing what they really were. The slave transport, Sophie Park felt the ship shudder as it had just course. She did not know what was happening out in space. She did not know that her father was coming for her. She only knew that she had to keep the other children safe until help arrived. Gathered the older kids together and spoke to them quietly. She told them that their parents were coming. She told them that they just had to be brave a little longer. She told them that humans never abandoned their children. Guard heard her speaking and laughed. "No one is coming for you, little one," he said. "Your parents have abandoned you. You belong to the Dominion now." She looked at him with steady eyes. "You do not know humans very well," she said. "You should not have taken us. Our parents will come. And when they do, you will wish you had never been born." Guard stopped laughing. Something in the little girl's voice made him uncomfortable. Something old and fierce that seemed wrong coming from such a young face. Fleet moved closer. The children waited. And across the darkness of space, a wrecking approached that they could not even imagine. In space like a dark jewel, surrounded by the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the Dominion. 2,000 warships formed a massive sphere around Prime, their weapons charged and ready. Dominion Overlord watched from his palace and felt certain that nothing could threaten his world. And the human fleet arrived. Admiral Grace looked at the tactical display and counted the enemy ships. Her officers waited for her orders. 800 human vessels against 2,000 warships. The numbers were bad. Any reasonable commander would have retreated. Not being reasonable. Her were down there on that planet somewhere, locked in a slave processing facility with 400 other stolen children. Retreat was not an option she was willing to consider. Opened a communication channel that broadcast on all frequencies, reaching every ship and every person in the system. This is Admiral Grace of the United Human Worlds. I am addressing the Dominion. You have taken our children. You have threatened to sell them as slaves. You have made demands that we surrender our territory to save them. Paused and let the sign straight out. My response? Return our children immediately and unharmed. Do that now and this conflict ends. Refuse and your civilization ends. You have 1 hour to decide. Overlord heard the message in his throne room and laughed. The sound echoed off the high walls. Human Ares knew no bounds. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. They were far from their own territory, and they dared to threaten the Dominion. Broadcast his own response. Foolish humans. You think your tiny fleet can stand against the might of, we will crush you like insects, and when we are done, we will take more of your children. We will make slaves of your entire species. Attack if you dare. Admiral listened to his response and nodded slowly. Very well, she said quietly. She turned to her tactical officer. All ships, weapons free. Execute attack pattern Omega. Battle of Prime began. The fleet surged forward in formations that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely calculated. They broke into smaller groups that flowed between the ships, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Led the assault carrier relentlessly into the heart of the enemy formation. His ship was large and should have been slow, but it moved with a grace that seemed impossible. Gunners tried to track it and found that their targeting systems could not keep up. When technology revealed itself for the first time, energy beams that cut through shields like they were made of paper, missiles that changed course mid-flight to avoid defenses, rail guns that fired projectiles so fast they were invisible. Had expected a battle, what they got was a massacre. In the first hour, 300 ships were destroyed. Within the second hour, 500 more. The human fleet took damage but kept fighting, damage control teams working frantically to keep ships in the battle. Overlord watched from his palace as his mighty fleet was torn apart. He could not understand what was happening. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to be peaceful. Where had these weapons come from? Where had this fury come from? The fourth hour, 1,500 ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 500 tried to retreat, but human vessels cut off their escape routes and hunted them down one by one. Received the signal from Admiral. The path to the planet was clear. It was time for the rescue. And stood in the dropship with her team of 50 soldiers. Dr. Park was strapped in beside her, a metal kit in his lap and fear in his eyes. He should not have been there. He was not a soldier, but nothing could have kept him away. Dropship fell through the atmosphere of Prime like a burning meteor. Anti-aircraft fire reached up toward them, but the pilot dodged and weaved through it with incredible skill. They hit the ground hard near the slave processing facility, and the doors blew open. The charge? Her soldiers moved like ghosts, fast and silent and deadly. Guards tried to stop them and died where they stood. The team pushed deeper into the facility, following the maps they had memorized during the journey. They found the children in a massive holding chamber deep underground. 412 small faces looked up at them, dirty and scared but alive. All of them alive. Officer tried to use the children as shields, holding a weapon to the head of a small boy. He screamed that he would kill them all if the humans did not back away. Not hesitate. Her shot took him between the eyes before he could finish speaking. Park pushed through the soldiers and ran into the chamber. He was calling his daughter's name, his voice breaking with emotion. Sophie, Sophie, where are you? A small figure emerged from the crowd of children and ran toward him. Sophie threw herself into her father's arms and held on tight, fell to his knees and held his daughter, tears streaming down his face. She was alive. She was safe. She was in his arms again. You would come, Sophie whispered. I told them you would come. Evacuation began immediately. Soldiers carried the youngest children while the older ones walked in organized groups, kept her team on high alert, but no more tried to stop them. The guards had fled or surrendered. The plant admiral received word that the children had been recovered, all 412 of them, not a single one harmed. Closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to feel relief. Then she opened them again and looked at the burning wreckage of the fleet. Overlord attempted to flee in his personal ship during the chaos. Admiral had anticipated this. A human cruiser disabled his engine with a single precise shot and towed his veil back toward the flagship. Battle was over, the children were safe. Now came the lightning. The channel to the defeated Overlord. Your fleet is gone. Your defenses are gone. Your children are safe in human hands. Now you will face human justice and the entire galaxy will watch. Nothing. For the first time in his long, cruel life, he had no words. He had thought humans were prey. He had learned too late that they were something far more dangerous. He should lift it off from the plant's surface, carrying the children toward safety. Dr. Park held Sophie close and watched Prime shrink in the viewport. The nightmare was over. They were going home. War ended 12 hours after the Battle of Prime. The Dominion surrendered unconditionally. They had no choice. Their fleet was destroyed. Their military was broken. Their leaders were in human custody. 2 centuries of brutal expansion and conquest ended in a single day. And Daniel addressed the galaxy from the steps of the Uni Hall on Earth. Behind him stood representatives from every human world, united in a way they had not been in generations. Children of New Haven are safe, he said. Every single one of the 412 has been recovered unharmed. They are being reunited with their families as I speak. This crisis is over. Paused and looked directly into the cameras that broadcast these words across 1,000 worlds. Let me be clear about what has happened here. The Dominion committed an act of war against humanity, obtaining our children. They believed we were weak. They believed we would not fight. They were wrong. Across the galaxy, beings of 100 different species watched and listened. Many of them had wondered about humans over the years, the peaceful traders, the friendly diplomats, the people who always seemed to prefer talking over fighting. They understood that there was more to humanity than they had seen. Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 days later. High Council presided, but his usual calm demeanor was shaken. He had lived for over 400 years and thought he understood the galaxy. The events of the past week had shown him how wrong he was. Ambassador Santos stood before the council once again. This time, no one laughed. No one dismissed her. Every delegate listened with careful attention. And he did not want the war, Santos said. We have spent 2 centuries building peace. We have hidden our strength because we did not want to frighten our neighbors. We wanted to be friends, not conquerors. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. There are lines that cannot be crossed. There are acts that cannot be forgiven. Taking children for slavery is one of those acts. They crossed that line and they paid the price. The delegate sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the floor. His people's future now rested entirely in human hands. Santos continued. Humanity does not seek revenge. We do not want to destroy thee or enslave them as they would have enslaved our children. That is not who we are, but there will be consequences. Outline the terms of surrender. The slave trade would be abolished completely and permanently. All slaves currently held in territory would be freed and returned to their homes. The Dominion would be reduced to a single system under permanent human monitoring. Their military would be limited to defensive forces only. The Lord and the commanders who had ordered the raid on New Haven would face trial for crimes against humanity. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. No one objected, no one dared. The counselor spoke after Santos finished. Ambassador, the council has always wondered why humans seem so reluctant to use force. You had the technology, you had the numbers, yet you always chose diplomacy. Now we understand that you were holding back. May I ask why? Santos was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. We know what we are, High Counselor. We know what we are capable of. Our history is written in blood. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times before we reached the stars. We made a choice to be better, to be peaceful, to build instead of destroy. He looked around the chamber. We never forgot how to fight. We never stopped preparing for the day when fighting might be necessary. We hoped the day would never come. We were wrong. The session ended with unanimous approval of the surrender terms. The Dominion as a galactic power ceased to exist. New Haven Colony, reconstruction had already begun. Commander Lena Marsh supervised the rebuilding efforts with quiet determination. The colony had been damaged but not destroyed. The people had been hurt but not broken. Park brought Sophie and Time back to their home. The house was untouched by the raid, standing peaceful and unchanged in the afternoon sun. Sophie stood in the yard and looked at the wheat fields straightening toward the horizon. And she said, will the bad aliens ever come back? Down beside his daughter and thought carefully before answering. Sophie, sometimes being kind is a choice. People can choose to be kind even when they could choose to be cruel. Humans chose kindness a long time ago. We chose peace. We also never forgot how to protect our families. We never forgot how to protect our children. So no, I do not think anyone will try to hurt you again. I think the galaxy understands now that there are some things you should never do. Sophie nodded slowly. She was only 8 years old, but she had grown up a lot in the past 2 weeks. I was scared, she admitted. I was really scared, but I tried to be brave for the little kids. Dr. Tight, you were very brave. You were the bravest person I know. Well, Grace retired from active duty 1 month after the war ended. She had served humanity for 40 years, and she was tired, but she kept her uniform pressed and ready in her closet, just in case. Visit her often at her home on Luna. They played in her garden and listened to her stories about the stars. They did not talk about what had happened on New Haven. They did not need to. They were safe, and that was all that mattered. Built New Haven School opened on a bright morning 6 months after the raid. Children ran through its halls laughing and playing, their voices echoing off new walls. Above them, in orbit around the plant, a permanent human defense stage stood watch. A Galactic Council diplomatic vessel passed through the system on its way to the outer territories. The captain, a young on his first long voyage, noted the station in his log. Haven Colony, human territory. Threat level assessment, do not provoke under any circumstances. Look at the peaceful plant below, at the wheat fields and the small towns and the children playing in the schoolyards. He thought about the stories his grandfather had told him, about what humans had done when someone threatened their young. Galaxy had learned an ancient truth that day, a truth that humans had always known about themselves. They were builders and dreamers. They were healers and teachers. They preferred peace and friendship and trade. They reached out to other species with open hands and warm smiles. Threatened their children, and they would remind the universe why ancient Earth had been called a death world, and why its children had survived when so many other species had not. Park grew up to be a diplomat. She spent her life building bridges between species, continuing the work of peace that humans valued so deeply. She never forgot those dark days on the slave ship. She never forgot being brave for the little one. She never forgot what her people could become when someone gave them no other choice.